Today I tell the story of that time my friend almost died. Here we go.
All right. I tried to find the field where it happened. I was looking for the scene of the crime so hard. I'm about 30 miles from home, and I'm just sort of outside the area I fly all the time. And sorry, weather's coming. I don't have endless gas. I can't find the field, but I can still tell the story. I'm out with my friend Ross, and we're flying together, and everything is awesome, right? It's a beautiful day, the kind of like perfect butter sky that only happens 5-10 times a year. There's an amazing sunset. Everything is perfect. We decide to fill the tanks up extra high so we can fly extra long. And, you know, just like today, we went out a little past where we normally go, and Ross looks down and says, "Hey, there's a cool maze." Now, we'll just pretend this golf course is the maze. That's what we call it when it's a nice place to fly around, right? Like, can you imagine going down there and like ripping around the curves at 10 feet off the ground and just banking and rocking? And it's a fun thing to do on a paramotor. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you find farms that are shaped like this, where it's just a nice like labyrinth of trees and an oddly shaped farm, and you can rip around. So Ross drops in first, and I sort of like do a pass at, I don't know, 500 feet or something, looking around for obstacles and such. Ross is buzzing around, and he's having the time of his life. And it's like, all right, cool. Then I drop in, and I start buzzing around. And it's everything we thought it would be. Some of the turns are big and easy and, like, wide, so they're not sketch at all. And some of the other turns are sketch. And you know, you're banking and working hard to, like, not hit anything. And then you slam the throttle and climb over the trees and go somewhere else. And it was just super cool. So we do that for a while, and you know, the sunset's not too far away and we have to get back home. We both have strobes to stay legal for a while, and Ross says, "Woody, you know, we should head back." And I was like, "Yeah, you're right, but you know what? Let's go for one more, you know, loop around here, because this is a special day and I just didn't want it to end yet." And you know, he decides to do that. I do my thing and we rip around for a bit. And I don't have eyes on him at this point, right? Like, we're not looking at each other. And we have these 2-meter radios where we can talk to each other. And he says, "Woody, I fucked up. I'll get some altitude." Well, you see, the thing is, I know Ross. And Ross is not at all prone to silly drama, right? He wouldn't say that if it wasn't like a big problem. So I figure he crashed. I kind of knew it. And he explains that he's down and he doesn't know how hurt he is. So I'm like, oh my, right? And all of a sudden, I'm in the yellow, right? That's a term I heard by a motorcycle vlogger, and it just kind of means like you're on edge. You're not clear-minded, perfect version of yourself. I'm in the yellow. So I come around and I see Ross on the ground and his wing in a disorganized heap next to a power line. And it's like, oh boy, like, I don't know how bad this is. I know we can talk on the radio, so he's not dead, but beyond that, like, I don't know. So I make a pass and kind of inspect the area, and I make another pass thinking I'm going to land, but it's not quite right. So I throttle on, and it takes me a couple minutes to land, like maybe 5, to get down there and next to him. While I'm doing that, there was a couple, like an adult husband and wife, who saw it all happen. And they made it to Ross before I did. So Ross is laying on the ground even like 5 minutes later. He has some experience because he was like a rescue swimmer for like boat races and stuff. He's a scuba guy, scuba instructor, and he would jump out of helicopters and be like a first responder if someone got into trouble during like those high-speed ocean boat races and such. Anyway, I bring that up because he's doing like self-evaluation. You know, how are my toes? How are my hands? How is my hip? Like, you know, where is my injury and what am I dealing with? He's hurt though. His back is hurt in ways he can't quite quantify. His like hip pelvis is hurt, and his wing is damaged. And we're kind of piecing together what happened between the people who saw it and the damage and stuff. And Ross had hit the power line. So he was coming at the power line, and he had just saw it at the last second. Well, these things are only so maneuverable. So he jams on a brake, but instead of turning, it kind of spins, and he hits the power line and lands. And like I said, I'm a little in the yellow. Like I've been told I'm really good in these crisis situations, but in this particular one, I don't give myself super high marks. Maybe because it's paramotor related and it just hit kind of close to home. So I start like packing up his wing and looking at his stuff and making sure that that's okay, rather than sort of aiding him in like his evaluation and figuring out how Ross is. And his wing is burnt. There's a big hole in it. Like, I don't know how to describe the size. Big enough to put a pumpkin in. And the edges of the hole are not just torn, they're burnt like plastic gets when you take a flame to it. It's kind of like hard and plastic. Like you know what happens when you burn nylon or burn a nylon rope? It gets those like little plastic burn balls. That's what's on his wing. And it's like, holy smokes, like this isn't a maybe. He hit a power line and crashed, and now he's hurt, but he's kind of in shock, and he kind of has like an adrenaline rush, and it's preventing him from understanding how hurt he is. We'll cover that in a bit. All right. So we come up with a plan, and the plan is this. I'm going to get back on my paramotor and fly home, grab his van, pick him up, and then somewhere in the drive back and stuff, we'll figure out if he needs to go to the emergency room that night. I launched my paramotor barely. Again, like I'm not the best version of me at this point, and I don't know, I stumble, I hit the throttle, it saves me, I make it in the air. And I'm terrified of flying at this point. Like, I watched this podcast, Cloud-Based Mayhem, and in there they often talk about this concept of a fear injury. And a fear injury is one in which you're not physically hurt, but make sure it's not all wet. You're not physically hurt, but you're like mentally hurt. You know, you're a little bit on edge. You're tight. You're not just like in a flow state that athletes or computer programmers get in them. You know, where you're just like, if you ever play basketball and you're half decent at it, I'm not. You know, when you're just sinking shot after shot on automatic, that's the flow state, and that is gone for me. I am not in a flow state in the slightest. My wing has these trimmers where you can adjust your speed, and I'm like scared to go full trims at full trim speed. This is something I've done a ton of times. The whole flight back, and it's like half an hour, I'm nervous about the landing. Now, at this point, I was probably like a 600 flight pilot. I know how to land, right? I've done it lots of times, usually successfully. It's not something I sit there and dread, like, oh my gosh, the landing's still coming up. I'm comfy with it. But in this flight, the whole time, like, oh my God, I'm not touching my trimmers because what I'm doing now is working and I don't want to change a thing. If I could just land without smashing myself up, I'll be so happy. So I do. I hit my landing, as you'd expect, right? Like, it was a nil-win night. Of course I hit my landing. And I pick him up, and in terms of his injuries, he's not good, but he decides he doesn't want to go to the emergency room that night. That what he really wants is to get to his house, sit in his recliner, and evaluate himself in the morning. So the next morning I get a text, and he's like, Woody, I need to go to the ER. We do that. They get some x-rays. Later we visit a specialist for spinal injuries and such. The deal is this. His spine is bruised, maybe even compressed, but not broken. So he's not a surgical case. His pelvis, they couldn't find it on the x-rays, but he can feel it shifting, like in the middle, in a way that it doesn't shift. Side note, if you've ever been a pregnant woman, it does shift. But the pregnant women get this like pelvis looseness that helps them deliver babies. And Ross had that too. So for the next 2 or 3 days, I think it was like 3 days from the incident, but he spent 2 nights in our guest house. And taking care of Ross was no problem, but he needed help. Like he would use a walker to get next to the bed, but he couldn't get in the bed without my help. I had to like lift his feet and put him in the bed. And you might think that like the cost of that was my time. No big deal. And on that respect, you're right? Like it was nothing. Like I'm happy to help. You need a friend? I'm a friend. Here we are. So, we fed him and took care of him for a couple of days. The thing that was hard on me, actually, was seeing him injured. I had been injured before. I got injured in a paragliding accident where I didn't launch well. It kind of picked me up and dropped me, and I broke my leg in 3 places. One of them was like a surgical thing, and they put some hardware in there, and I healed. The whole time I was healing, right, I was either doing physical therapy or bed rest. And the whole time, I'm watching acro videos and dreaming of a rematch so that maybe I want to go back to that hill in similar conditions with my new skill set and try it again. That's how I felt. I didn't have a fear injury. I wanted a rematch. I wanted edit. I wanted to be better than ever. I wanted to kite so that I wouldn't make that mistake again. That didn't do it. What did do it, though, was when Ross got hurt. When Ross got hurt because he hit a power line, that messed with my head a bunch, and that made me question paramotoring a bit. It certainly made me question like doing acro moves and such. So and I didn't get over that for a while. Shortly before Ross was hurt, I was practicing full stalls at Aviator on an acro wing, which is a little safer for that kind of thing. And it was a blast. And suddenly I've got a new trick, to work into my arsenal and have a fun time with. I couldn't do them anymore. I was just like, forget that. I don't feel so comfy with these full stalls. I'm just happy the thing works at all, that this contraption doesn't just send me barreling into the ground. That's where my head was. So what I like about acro is it keeps paramotoring fresh for me. If I just do the same 2 or 3 moves, wing overs, asymmetric spirals, sats, and loops, then it feels like I'm just doing the same thing again and again. And then when I add full stalls and dynamic sats, my 2 new things, suddenly I've kind of doubled the amount of stuff I do, and it really kept it fresh. But that just became a lower priority compared to like just working through my fear issues. And that's what I did. I asked another guy with a podcast, Robert Michaels, hey, when you had your near crash at Palomar, how long did it take you to get through it? And he said like 5 or 7 flights. So I was hoping for something similar, just 5 flights, 7 flights, and I'd get past it. But it took a little more than that for me. I probably had like 14 flights, and I was still feeling it. And headed into my SIV course, I still hadn't done any full stalls. And that turned out to be the magic thing that I needed to kind of break through. In an SIV course, you're over water, and you have an instructor who's handling some of your responsibilities. He's watching your altitude for you. He can see your wing. He knows what he's looking at. He's in your ear on the radio telling you like what's safe, what's not safe, where you are, and how to do new things. And there's just, and you're over water. So even if your wing is a stall ball and you hit the water, that's not good, but it certainly beats land. But much more often, you're under reserve, even a poorly deployed reserve, and between the wing and the reserve and stuff. Even if you hit hard, you hit water hard, and it's not you're not going so hard that it's like concrete, like jumping off a tall bridge or something. So I went to the SIV course, and I kind of just put on a brave face, where it's like, no one here needs to know that I'm scared of paramotoring right now, right? Like this can just be between my own ears, and we'll rock it that way. which is exactly what I did. I went up there, first flight, kind of showed him where I was, and then started working on things I had never done before. I started not just doing full stalls, but by dynamic full stalls. Not just sats, but by dynamic sats, which are cool moves. I'm not sure. There's weather out there. I'd show you them, but I wanted to just get back and land it safely. Anyway, so it took about a month for me to get over my fear injury and just be normal me again. And it took about 6 weeks for Ross to fly again. All right. Maybe we do have time for a little run. Now, to most of you, this will just look like a big mess. But there are tens of people who think that this is pretty cool. This one is kind of a mess, so you're all right. There we go. All right, now if we could just find an exit where it kind of surges forward. Maybe here, check it. Nice. Do some wing overs. I think I'm gonna go for a dynamic sat next left. Here we go. Does it flip over? Yeah, it does. All right, that was not bad. Do some more wing overs. Hoo-hoo. There it is. Go big, Woody. Super big. All right, maybe one more. Nice. And then we'll start working out the energy. Boy. So that's kind of I got over my fear injury thing. Future Woody here. I actually forgot I left the camera on for my landing, so I didn't say anything, but I thought I'd narrate it after the fact. It was bumpy. It's not unusual at my house for this layer right around the trees and a couple 100 feet above it to be extra bumpy, just all kinds of mechanical turbulence as the wind is blowing. And I could feel it picking me up and dropping me and picking me up and dropping me, but I feel like I really lucked out. You can see, I don't know if you saw it right there. I was kind of standing still, getting lifted, and then I surge afterwards. With every lift, there's usually a corresponding drop. And right as I went to land on the other side of this downhill, probably because of the compression, it just picked me up and placed me down so gently. And it was the end of a really nice flight. I hope you'd like the video. I like making it.